They had lives, all of it gone now, as they sit on the table in front of you. I work at a coroner's office that doubles as a crime laboratory. As an autopsy technician, I'm eviscerating organs. I will remove their throat, remove their brain using a scalpel, a bone saw, and a T-tool. I hand them off to a doctor, who will then dissect them, and from that determine cause of death. I definitely like the aspect of helping to bring justice to victims of murder and other horrific crimes. There was one case where a female had been stabbed to death by a man, and while doing evidence, I had found underneath her fingernail the possible fingernail of her attacker as well as some dead skin. It was the very aha moment of this doesn't belong to her. You have gotten something that potentially gave this woman justice. You're going to see and do a lot of horrible things. I once went to a very rundown $30 a night kind of stay hotel. Someone had reported a horrifying stench in one of the rooms adjacent to them, and sure enough, the police found a very large decedent stuck to the ground, having been dead for probably months at this point. The decedent has thousands of maggots and other insects crawling in and out of their body, making new holes right in front of you. Their skin wriggles. They almost seem alive. We did have to cut off a large portion of their carpet in order to transport him out of the building. There was just no way we could physically get him to move without ripping off all what's left of his skin into the carpet, which is leaving behind potential evidence. We brought him back, almost immediately did an autopsy on him. He definitely had died from a drug overdose. There are some bad diseases that can potentially mess you up while you're doing an autopsy. There was one case where we didn't have much medical history on the decedent. When I opened up the decedent's skull cap, I saw a large chunk of veins were this dark greenish color. Lo and behold, meningitis right there on the brain. I've been overwhelmed on plenty of occasions. Once, while retrieving a body from a rack that was taller than I was, I had gone to pull it out, and all the liquid in the decedent had soaked through the bag. I got splashed from about neck down, covered in his blood, and all I was wearing was typical nurse scrubs you'd see. Just a feeling of cold blood all over me and some giblets of fat that were on me. I immediately got sick to my stomach. I didn't vomit, but this feeling all over my skin and the realization that this guy is on me made me nauseous, and I ran to the bathroom, tracking blood everywhere, and took a shower, and that was the longest shower I've ever taken. When we're doing autopsies, we play music through a speaker. That's one way to kind of disconnect yourself from the person you're about to cut open. We do try to keep a lighthearted mood. I remember specifically turning around to my manager who was in the suite and saying, "You're not going to believe what I just found in this guy's butt." I found 3 sex toys on decedents, 2 male, 1 female. The men both had dildos in their rectums as well as women's undergarments. And the female actually had a vibrator in her stomach, of all places. I guess she had swallowed it, but yep, it was there. It was just a giggle for a moment, and we proceeded on with our jobs. It does kind of chip away at you a little bit when you're doing this kind of job. It makes me scared for the future because there are some truly evil people out there, and they look like everyone. You can never tell when someone's evil. Even if someone died for an innocent reason, it's not natural to see them butterflied open, rib chest plate open, all their organs out of their body. It's just not natural. It's something that impacts your mind no matter how strong you are. Death is one of the biggest taboos for most people. We're all barreling towards this inevitable demise. The death industry is a very important industry because it deals with the thing that nobody wants to deal with.
Well, hi there. These are vampire crabs. And given that we've entered the month of October, they just seem appropriate. There are actually a whole lot of different vampire crabs out there, but they all fall into the genus Geosisarma. And in most ways, they're pretty similar in care. You just keep them in a coffin during the day, avoid exposure to garlic, and feed them blood. Just to be clear, don't do any of that. The name vampire crab is a bit misleading. They don't drink blood, though they will at times eat their own offspring. So filial cannibal crabs, that probably makes more sense. That said, most decapods will probably eat their offspring if they're housed in the same box for long enough. So filial cannibal crab might just describe pretty much all crabs. They're omnivores and actually get along pretty well with other vampire crabs, at least of their own species. Really, the only reason I can find for their common name is that their eyes, in many species, these included, are bright yellow. And they're most active at night. But whatever you call them, vampire crabs are beautiful. I mean, look at these colors. Like vampires, but unlike most crabs, they live and reproduce primarily on land. Their larvae even develop into mini crabs while still in the egg, so they hatch out as fully formed little crabs. I have to tell you, the first time I ever saw vampire crabs are beautiful. I mean, look at these colors. Like vampires, but unlike most crabs, they live and reproduce primarily on land. Their larvae even develop into mini crabs while still in the egg, so they hatch out as fully formed little crabs. I have to tell you, the first time I ever saw these guys, I fell in love. They were one of the first pets that Leisha and I had after we got married, and I still love them very much. But are these beautiful little yellow-eyed gems good pets? And is the vampire crab the best pet crustacean for you? To help you figure this out, we're going to have to give the vampire crab a score based on our 5 categories, which are handleability, care, hardiness, availability, and upfront costs. Today's video is sponsored by the Ridge wallet, and I gotta tell you, I've been carrying a Ridge wallet now for several years. In fact, all of us here at Concept Tiles carry Ridge wallets. This was my very first one, the pressed carbon. I really liked it. It was basically perfect. But after a while, I decided I got this one with the money clip. I wanted the strap instead. I switched over to this guy, which I always called the Stormtrooper. I actually loved it. Had a money clip. It was super great, and I've been carrying this one ever since. Until recently, I discovered that Ridge now has leather wallets. They've got them in black, which is what I've been carrying, and brown, which now I'm considering switching over to the brown. And somehow, this might be the most perfect Ridge wallet yet, because I can get it with the money strap. But also, I like that the money strap is leather, just like the wallet is. I've loved when people come into here at Concept Tile Room all the time, and they're like, here's my Ridge wallet. They always want to show me the Ridge wallet because they know I carry one. They know we talk about them here. And I can tell you, no one has ever come in here and been like, I've been disappointed with the Ridge wallet. The Ridge wallet is a fantastic product. I didn't imagine I would be carrying it this long, but the reality is I have just loved it, and it's been the perfect wallet for me. Now, they have a lifetime warranty, so it seems a little silly to have 3 different ones that I've carried. And the reality is, even my oldest one that I carried the longest, it still looks great. It's holding up really, really well. But it's just kind of fun. And that's one of the fun things is there's like a million different options with Ridge. Whatever appeals to Clint. When it comes to handleability, we give the vampire crab a score of 4 out of 5. That's a very high score for a crab. But the reality is that this might be the most handleable crab in the world. The only real issues being that they are small and could be injured by improper or careless handling. And it's probably a bit stressful for them if you do it too often. So you need to be careful while handling them, and you need to be careful not to handle them so often that they get stressed out. And that's all for the benefit of the crab. But generally, if I were talking about a crab, I would be primarily concerned with those claws. Crab claws can hurt. When we were catching coconut crabs in Niue, I was a bit worried about having fingers removed by the crab's claws. Good job. After kindergarten, my family cared for the kindergarten class pet. It was a hermit crab, which is a much smaller hermit crab than the coconut crab, which is a giant hermit crab. And my dad, he thought that the claws on the little hermit crab were most likely just for show. But it turns out that he was wrong about that. And he let out a mighty scream when he tested his weak claw hypothesis. So even small crabs can pack a wallop. And while these guys do use their claws to incapacitate prey and to defend themselves from predators, they don't really seem to use them on humans. So they aren't going to hurt you. They're also primarily terrestrial, so keeping them out of the water while handling is not really an issue. And they don't run nearly as fast as many crabs, so they aren't likely to get away from you or jump off of you and get hurt as long as you don't keep them too high. And while they're small, they're pretty tough for their size. You could easily crush or injure one, but not nearly as easily as they could kill you if the sizes were reversed, like in Moana. Good thing that crabs are notorious singers and routinely serenade their meals before eating them, which, now that you mention it, Disney also has humans singing to crabs before eating them. I guess that's something we have in common with the crabs. The point is that this is a remarkably handleable crab, but I'm suddenly a bit disappointed that they don't sing. When it comes to care, we give the vampire crab a score of 4 out of 5. Really, the main reason that they don't get a 5 is because you need a water feature. And you also need to keep an eye on your water quality. So it's a little bit like keeping a fish tank, but not nearly as difficult because these crabs are primarily terrestrial. And they're tiny, so they're not going to mess up the water nearly as fast as larger aquatic crabs. They're very well suited to a paludarium, which is amazing. Paludariums are some of the most beautiful and interesting enclosures that you can make, but it is hard to find an animal that is really well suited to living in one. Well, good news! Vampire crabs! They're also tiny, so you can keep a few of them in a single 10-gallon or larger enclosure. Some people go even smaller, but 10-gallon enclosures are very common and inexpensive, so why? The difference in footprint is pretty negligible too. Just give them the extra inches. It's literally 4 inches longer and 2 inches wider than a 5.5 gallon. And it gives you more room for a waterfall and cool plants. The enclosure should be kept around room temperature, somewhere in the mid-70s Fahrenheit ideally, though it can fluctuate a bit higher or lower than that. So in the neighborhood of 24 degrees Celsius or 297 kelvins. Water should be a bit basic, but not above a pH of 8 or so. Acidic water is hard on crustaceans generally. And do occasional water changes to keep nitrogenous waste levels in check and keep salts from accumulating. Always be sure that water added to the enclosure is treated and chlorine-free. In addition to water changes, nitrogen levels can be kept in check with plants. Pothos is an amazing plant to use in a vampire crab setup because it will grow on land and in the water. Make sure that if your crabs end up in the water, which they will do from time to time, that they have easy ways to get back out, and pothos can help with this also. Even in this temporary enclosure, you've got a little pothos bridge. You should have lights to simulate day and night cycles, and for the plants, but no basking light or anything like that should be needed. And this should be pretty easy in a paludarium, but make sure to keep humidity levels fairly high. When it comes to food, the answer is that they will probably eat it. Basically, any sort of food, alive or not, that you would feed to smaller tropical fish, they will eat. And also insects like crickets and small cockroaches. Their enthusiasm for food is one good reason to keep them only with members of their own species that are roughly their same size. Remember, they will eat their babies, but I already told you that. There are many different species of vampire crabs, and their specific care may vary slightly based on the species that you get. So find care sheets specific to the species species that you get, or consult with a breeder